A fragile ceasefire between Hamas and Israel continues to hold, offering a tense respite in a conflict marked by humanitarian catastrophe. In the midst of this uneasy truce, US President Donald Trump has announced that phase 2 of his Gaza Peace Plan is now underway. He said, well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm, and if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. When pressed, he added, I don't have to explain that to you, but if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them, and it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. Phase 2 introduces some of the most contentious elements of the plan, chief among them the requirement that Hamas disarm. That demand has not yet been publicly accepted by Hamas under the terms of the truce brokered in Egypt on Monday. Other unresolved issues include how quickly Israeli forces might withdraw and how Gaza would be governed going forward. Trump emphasized that one part of the first phase remains unfulfilled. While all 20 living hostages were released earlier, only 4 out of the 28 agreed-upon bodies were returned at first, though Hamas then released another 4. But the Israeli military says forensic tests revealed that one of those bodies did not match any of the known hostages. As the military put it, Hamas remains obligated to abide by the agreement and make urgent efforts to return all remains. Hamas, for its part, has countered that it is struggling to locate some remains buried under rubble. The rubble is extensive, and that others may lie in territory still under Israeli control. He declared bluntly, above all else, get the hostages back. Now they misrepresented because we were told they had 26-24 of dead hostages, if we can use those terms, and it seems as though they don't have that. Tensions flared when Israel halved the flow of aid trucks into Gaza, cutting the number from 600 to 300 per day. Though one Israeli broadcaster said Rafah crossing would reopen, another report quoted an Israeli security official saying it would remain closed for logistical reasons. Meanwhile, airstrikes killed Palestinians in Gaza City and in the area of Kinous, marking what many saw as the first breach of the ceasefire. All of this underscores how delicate the peace deal is. Even as hostages were freed and a truce established, the fundamental questions of power, authority, and security still hang unresolved. Under the first phase of the truce, Hamas released all 20 living Israeli captives. In return, Israel released more than 1,900 Palestinian detainees. However, the exchange of deceased remains has become a focal point of contention. Hamas has delivered 8 bodies so far, but Israel contends that one of those was not among the known hostages. From Israel's perspective, every remaining body must be handed over before further steps in the peace plan can proceed. Hamas says the process is complicated by destruction, rubble, and access constraints. Israel has responded to delayed compliance by cutting aid deliveries and constricting access. The Rafah crossing remains closed, and humanitarian supplies have been reduced, moves widely seen as leverage to force Hamas's hand. Observers warn this tactic endangers relief efforts in Gaza, where civilian needs are acute. Phase 2, as envisioned by Trump's 20-point Gaza plan, centers on the demilitarization of Hamas, along with governance reforms and reconstruction efforts. The plan states that Gaza must become a de-radicalized terror-free zone and should no longer pose a threat to its neighbors. But these are lofty ideals with little clarity on the mechanics. Trump's repeated warnings imply that the US is prepared to intervene militarily if Hamas fails to disarm voluntarily. His language, perhaps violently, has sparked concern about escalation. Critically, though, he has not provided details on how or when such intervention would occur. From Israel's perspective, the commitment to disarm Hamas is non-negotiable. Netanyahu has publicly affirmed that Israel retains the right to resume military operations should Hamas violate the deal. In speeches, he has framed the ceasefire as a momentary pause, not a guarantee that conflict will not resume. Analysts caution that imposing disarmament on a militant organization is extremely difficult, even more so in a context of mutual distrust and ongoing hostilities. Without clear enforcement mechanisms and robust monitoring, any disarmament pledge may remain symbolic. A central unanswered question is, who will govern Gaza after Hamas? Trump's plan envisages a transitional governance structure, possibly involving technocrats, international oversight, and eventually a reintegration with the Palestinian Authority, though the details remain vague. The European Union is now being encouraged to play a greater role, particularly in reconstruction and institutional oversight, through a proposed Board of Peace. Despite promises of reconstruction, Gaza faces enormous challenges. The territory has suffered massive destruction of infrastructure, widespread displacement, and shortages of water, electricity, and basic services. The estimated cost and scale of rebuilding make international financing and political buy-in essential. Another concern is security. Even if Hamas demobilizes its military wing, residual armed groups or external militants could destabilize the territory. Ensuring lasting security will likely require external oversight or peacekeeping forces. The logic of the US plan assumes this, but implementing it is fraught with risks. Aid suspension as leverage, halting humanitarian flows risks undermining civilian relief and provoking a humanitarian crisis. Mismatch in returned remains. If Israel continues to declare that transferred bodies don't match, it may undermine trust and delay next steps. Ambiguity in disarmament. Without a credible timeline or enforcement plan, the threat of force could erode credibility. Internal Palestinian fractures. Governance between Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and local factions may fracture. Renewal of hostilities. Any sign of ceasefire violations or militant rearmament could reignite combat. The ceasefire has paused the most intense conflict for now. The release of all living hostages brought relief to many families and bolstered hopes that diplomacy could move forward. But the most difficult chapters lie ahead. The demands for full return of remains, disarmament of Hamas, and determination of Gaza's governance remain deeply contested. It is in this uncertain space that Trump has declared the start of Phase 2, but intentions alone will not suffice. Unless these key elements are resolved credibly, backed by enforceable mechanisms, strong oversight, and international cooperation, the truce may prove a temporary lull rather than a lasting peace. If you like, I can expand this into 4 to 5 shorter pieces, e.g. on hostages, disarmament, governance, or produce a timeline. Which would you prefer?